number 10, we have the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. President Truman allowed the use of nuclear weapons on Japan on August 6, 1945. He justified the order to release the weapons by exclaiming that it would end the war quicker and save more American lives. However, in hindsight, it was a very immoral decision to make. Within an instant, people, buildings, and infrastructure were instantly vaporized and reduced to ashes. The use of nuclear weapons was then included into the Geneva Convention. The same attack on a country now would be highly illegal. It would violate three major requirements of the law of armed conflict codified in Additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions: the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons includes a comprehensive set of prohibitions on participating in any nuclear weapon activities. At number 9, John Adams. The second president ordered the prosecution of several newspaper editors under the Sedition Act, a law that was later ruled by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional. Therefore, he arguably violated the US Constitution, the supreme law of the United States. Though Adams was a founding father of the United States' democracy, he couldn't take personal insults. In July 1798, he signed the Alien and Sedition Act that, among other things, made it illegal to write, print, utter, or publish any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the president and other executive branch officials. The alien part of the law allowed the government to deport immigrants and made it harder for naturalized citizens to vote. But the law was mainly designed to mute backers of the opposition Democratic-Republican Party led by Thomas Jefferson, who also happened to be the vice president. At number 8, President Andrew Johnson was impeached by the House of Representatives in 1868 during clashes with Congress over his post-Civil War policies, including his firing of Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton. He was acquitted by the Senate. Impeachment is the process by which a legislative body or other legally constituted tribunal initiates charges against a public official for misconduct. The primary charge against Johnson was that he had violated the Tenure of Office Act, specifically that he had acted to remove from office Edwin Stanton and to replace him with Brevet Major General Lorenzo Thomas as Secretary of War ad interim. At number 7, President Bill Clinton. In 1998, President Bill Clinton was impeached by the House of Representatives for perjury and obstruction of justice related to his attempted cover-up of his relationship with former White House intern Monica Lewinsky. The Clinton-Lewinsky scandal was an intimacy scandal involving then US President Bill Clinton and 24-year-old White House intern Monica Lewinsky that took place in 1998. Their intimate relationship lasted between 1995 and 1997. Clinton ended a televised speech in late January 1998 with the statement that he did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. Further investigation led to charges of perjury and to the impeachment of Bill Clinton in 1998 by the US House of Representatives. He was subsequently acquitted on all impeachment charges of perjury and obstruction of justice in a 21-day US Senate trial. At number 6, President Richard Nixon was famously named by a grand general in 1974 as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Watergate scandal, but never charged with a crime. He resigned before an impeachment process could be completed and later was pardoned by President Gerald Ford. The Watergate scandal was a major political scandal in the United States involving the administration of President Richard Nixon from 1972 to 1974 that led to Nixon's resignation. The scandal stemmed from the Nixon administration's continual attempts to cover up its involvement in the June 17, 1972 break-in of the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Washington, D.C. Watergate office building. At number 5, the use of napalm on Vietnamese civilians. What distinguished napalm B, the variant employed in Vietnam, was how easily it could be made. Simple bathtub chemistry was used to mix together a concoction of gasoline, benzene, and other things. In 1965, the Pentagon requested bids from the 17 US companies that made polystyrene. One of the winning bids was from a small company based in Midland, Michigan, called Dow Chemical. Dow was only ranked 75th on a 1967 list of military contractors before getting into the napalm business. It was best known as the maker of Saran wrap. But Dow soon became the military's sole supplier of napalm, which meant that when its use in the Vietnam War became controversial, Dow was the only corporate target. President Lyndon B. Johnson was the one responsible for allowing this to happen. The use of napalm against civilians is extremely illegal. At number 4, another crime committed in Vietnam by Lyndon B. Johnson. Well, really a series of crimes. Tribunal members unanimously found the United States guilty on all charges including genocide, the use of forbidden weapons, maltreatment and execution of prisoners, violence and forceful movement of prisoners in Vietnam and its neighbors Laos and Cambodia. The Vietnam conflict was notorious for multiple reasons. As the first televised conflict in history, the US was now able to be exposed for their violent and excessive means of destroying an opposing country. Many war laws were broken by the United States at the time, and they caught a lot of flack in the media. Number 3. In 1963, John F. Kennedy and his administration supported a coup against the Iraqi government, a coup led by Abdul Salam Arif. The CIA sent Arif a list of suspected communists along with thousands of weapons. Saddam Hussein was an enforcer of Arif's Ba'athist party and, as we know, later became the head of the party and dictator of Iraq. This means the United States President JFK played a massive role in the coming to power of the notorious dictator Saddam Hussein, the same person the US would later declare a war against and hunt down. Number 2. According to the 5 senior judges who tried Bush and his administration, President Bush was responsible for the countless civilian passings in the course of the conflict in Iraq. As Mahathir Mohamad put it once the trial was over, powerful countries are getting away with execution. In 2012, George W. Bush was convicted in absentia of being a conflict criminal by the Kuala Lumpur Conflict Crimes Commission. 7 other people involved in the Bush administration were also convicted. Additionally, in 2013, Bush and his administration were also sued by an Iraqi mother for violating the Nuremberg principles because of the crimes of aggression against the Iraqi people. Number 1. Though Roosevelt had an alliance with Stalin, when it became clear that the Allied forces were going to defeat Germany, he began to lose control over Stalin's negotiations. Stalin ended up with a good amount of Eastern Europe, and Roosevelt thought he could fix the problem with even more negotiations, which, as media publisher Cracked puts it, is about as advisable as trying to gamble your way out of gambling debt. Roosevelt went on to deny aid to Polish troops who were fighting against the Soviet government and suppressed a report that blamed the Katyn massacre on the Soviets. Number 10. Prince Andrew and his terrifyingly evil crime. Britain's Prince Andrew, the second son of Queen Elizabeth II, is facing an SA lawsuit in the United States. An American woman, Virginia Giuffre, filed the lawsuit, claiming that an island-faring celebrity intimately hurt her, and British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell trafficked her to their wealthy friends. She sued Andrew in August 2021, stating that she was intimately trafficked to Prince Andrew and he SA'd her in 2001. Her lawyers submitted a photo of her with Andrew and Maxwell as evidence. However, Prince Andrew has repeatedly denied the accusations. Recently, a US judge denied a plea by Andrew to dismiss the lawsuit. The palace said that the Duke of York will continue not to undertake any public duties and is defending the case as a private citizen. In the aftermath, the royal family of Britain removed his military links and royal patronages. Number 9. Princess Anne's dangerous dogs and driving. In 2002, Princess Anne, the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, was found guilty of a charge under the Dangerous Dogs Act, becoming the first member of the present royal family to be convicted of a criminal offense. She pleaded guilty after it was claimed that one of her dogs, a 3-year-old English Bull Terrier called Dottie, bit 2 children as they walked in Windsor Great Park. She was fined and was subsequently ordered to pay £148 in court costs and £500 compensation to the 2 victims. However, the court had ordered Anne to keep her English Bull Terrier. She also faced a fine in 2001 when she was fined £400 for speeding in her Bentley. She admitted that she was driving at 93 miles per hour in a 70 miles per hour zone in Gloucestershire. It's kind of shocking how Princess Anne couldn't keep her dog under control. Considering she's a royal, you'd think she'd have the resources available to properly train it. Number 8. Treason. Some hundreds of years ago, when the modern era courtrooms did not exist, King Charles I was charged with tyranny and treason. He was brought to trial in Westminster Hall on January 20th in 1649, after the end of the English Civil War. He was sentenced to execution on January 26th of the same year and was eventually beheaded 4 days later outside the banqueting hall in Whitehall, London. The reason for him being charged with tyranny and treason is that his supporters and Oliver Cromwell's parliamentarians fought and executed each other, resulting in the king passing away during the battles. After the king passed away, Charles was found guilty of treason and tyranny and executed. Number 7. A car crash. In 2019, Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband, who passed away in 2021, found himself in trouble after a car crash that left a woman with a broken wrist. He did not face any charges, as a probe against him was dropped after the late Duke handed in his driving license. The incident had happened near his private Sandringham estate in eastern London. The other car involved was a Kia, and its female driver and passenger were treated in the hospital and later discharged. The police even gave Prince Philip a breathalyzer test. Norfolk police said officers were called to the Sandringham estate shortly before 3 p.m., following reports of a collision involving 2 cars. Norfolk police said, "It is forced policy to breath test drivers involved in collisions. We can confirm both drivers were breath tested and provided negative readings." Number 6. A conspiracy of theft. Former royal butler Paul Burrell was arrested for theft in January 2001 after a raid on his home led to the recovery of thousands of items police believed were were taken from Diana's Kensington Palace apartment. The possessions included paintings, drawings, china, photographs, clothes, and even personal notes from the late princess to her sons. But just days into the trial, the case dramatically collapsed. It was revealed the Queen had suddenly recalled a meeting soon after Diana's passing, during which Paul had told her that he'd kept some of her possessions for safekeeping. It was later alleged the Queen intervened to stop the case after Prince Charles became concerned by what Diana's trusted aide would reveal in court. Number 5. Colonialism. Beginning in Malaya, then in Kenya, Cyprus, Nyasaland, Aden, and Northern Ireland, British security forces moved through the empire and acted in the Queen's name, unleashing wide-scale detention without trial and illegal deportations. In Malaya and Kenya, they forcibly relocated hundreds of thousands of subjects into barbed wire villages. In each conflict, execution squads were deployed and populations terrorized. In Cyprus, journalists called interrogators HMTs, Her Majesty's torturers. Number 4. Tampering with evidence. Beginning with her first Prime Minister Winston Churchill, the Queen's ministers not only knew of systematic British-directed violence in the empire, they also participated in its crafting, diffusion, and cover-up, which was as routinized as the violence itself. They repeatedly lied to Parliament and the media, and when decolonization was imminent, ordered the widespread removal and burning of incriminating evidence. There's no extant documentary evidence directly linking her to knowledge of systemic violence and cover-up in the empire, nor were her weekly meetings with the Prime Minister recorded. The evidence we do have suggests that she, like the public, was told any instance of brutality was an unfortunate one-off, and minor colonial officials were to blame. Number 3. The bloody decolonization. Maya Jasanoff, a professor at Coolidge University, cited the bloody insurgencies and counterinsurgencies waged in Kenya, Malaya, and Cyprus, which involved massive amounts of execution and torture and castration committed by the British. The royals were trotted out as ceremonial figures at what appeared to be peaceful transfers of power, but behind the scenes, the transfers were anything but peaceful in a number of places and anything but willing on the part of the British. All of this runs counter to the popular glistening image of the late Queen as a ruler who supported many humanitarian efforts and possessed an egalitarian nature. Number 2. Saying one thing and doing another. Not actually supporting Nelson Mandela. People talk about her views about apartheid, and I've heard people commenting on her enthusiasm at welcoming Nelson Mandela when he was president of the Republic of South Africa, said Jasanoff, who also noted how the British government during Elizabeth's reign rejected Rhodesia's unilateral declaration of independence, a move designed to create a white minority-ruled state in the former African colony. But these are symbolic gestures, or they were largely behind the scenes. On the ground, it looked so different from the glossy images of the White Queen on tours of exotic former colonies. Number 1. Adultery. The notorious Queen Isabella of England, daughter of King Philip IV of France, was alleged to have outed her careless sister-in-laws out of wedlock romps, which took place primarily in a Parisian tower called the Tour de Nesle. Blanche and Marguerite both admitted to adultery. Their erasure from public life was swift. The Donnay brothers were castrated, their nether regions thrown to dogs while they were still alive, before being brutally executed. The two sisters had their hair cut short and were both thrown into a dungeon. Number 10. John Wayne Gacy. Gacy is actually the inspiration behind the infamous Pennywise the Clown from hit movies It and It 2. In his early life and career, Gacy performed as a clown to entertain children during events and birthdays and to raise money for charity. His clown alias was Pogo the Clown, but while he was in costume, his demeanor changed from a happy face painter to a remorseless criminal. Gacy tortured and executed 33 people, usually men, between January 1972 and late 1978. He was later convicted of his crimes and was executed by lethal injection in late 1994. Number 9. Ted Bundy. Bundy was a charismatic and handsome individual. He used his charm to gain trust from his victims and society as a whole. He would typically approach his victims in public places, either feigning a physical impairment such as an injury or impersonating an authority figure, before bludgeoning them into unconsciousness and taking them to a secondary location to be strangled. After denying his crimes for over a decade, Ted Bundy confessed to 30 executions committed in 7 states over 4 years. Although he confessed to 30, his true victim total may be higher. Number 8. Timothy McVeigh. Timothy James McVeigh was a veteran of the Gulf conflict who went on to commit extreme acts of violence. He was responsible for the 1995 Oklahoma City tragedy that executed 168 people, injured more than 680 others, and destroyed 1/3 of the Alfred P. Murrah federal building. McVeigh sought revenge against the federal government for the 1993 Waco siege, as well as the 1992 Ruby Ridge incident and American foreign policy. He hoped to inspire a revolution against the federal government, and defended the tragedy as a legitimate tactic against what he saw as a tyrannical government. He was arrested shortly after the tragedy and indicted on 160 state offenses and 11 federal offenses. including the use of a weapon of mass destruction. He was found guilty on all counts in 1997 and sentenced to execution by lethal injection. Number 7. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer became known as the Milwaukee Cannibal when the partial remains of his victims, including a severed head in the fridge, were discovered in his apartment. He executed, dismembered, and cannibalized 17 victims between 1978 and 1991. Dahmer was finally caught when an intended victim managed to escape from the building and alert the police. Sentenced to life behind bars, Dahmer's sick and twisted sense of humor didn't make him any friends at Wisconsin's Columbia Correctional Institution. Dahmer was known to play with his food, sculpting his dinner to look like severed limbs and using ketchup as blood. Number 6. Thor Nys Christensen. Thor Nys Christensen targeted female students at the University of California in Santa Barbara. Born in Denmark, Christensen was a promising student with a high IQ, but he later dropped out of school and began working at a gas station. Christensen stole a pistol from a friend and became obsessed with a fantasy of shooting women, a fantasy he would eventually make a reality. His execution spree later earned him the nickname the Mad Dane. Christensen's execution spree was referred to as look-alike executions, as all his victims were strikingly similar. He was finally caught when his 5th intended victim escaped after being shot in the head, and after her recovery, she met him again in a Los Angeles bar. Number 5. Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman, also known as Dr. Demise, is believed to have executed at least 218 patients, although the total is quite likely closer to 250. This doctor practiced in London between 1972 and 1998, worked in 2 different offices, executing all the while. He wasn't caught until a red flag was raised by several people, including an undertaker who was surprised by the sheer number of cremation certificates Shipman was a part of, along with the fact that most of the cases were elderly women found to have passed away in the bed, not at night, but rather during the day, when he was on shift. Police mishandled the investigation, and Shipman kept executing until he got greedy and tried to concoct a will for a victim that named him beneficiary, which led the victim's daughter to become suspicious. He was finally convicted in 2000. Number 4. H.H. Holmes. H.H. Holmes was a pharmacist who converted a 3-story hotel into a psychological and physical torture castle. Holmes moved to Chicago ahead of the 1893 World's Fair and began turning the hotel into a nightmare. The hotel was outfitted with contraptions such as gas lines, secret passages, trap doors, hallways that led to nowhere, chutes to the basement, soundproofed padding, and torture devices strewn through a maze. The gas lines were used to incapacitate guests, which he would then cut open on surgical tables. He then burned the bodies in the building's furnace, selling the skeletons to medical schools and running life insurance scams. In all, he confessed to more than 30 executions, found only after a fellow scammer turned him in for falling short on a financial agreement. Number 3. Samarin Bell. Around 2003, Bell, then working as a janitor at the Morgan Metals Industrial Park in La Habra, was involved in a check cashing scheme involving several individuals, one of whom was his girlfriend, 22-year-old Ineka Edmondson. The operation eventually fell through, and one of the accomplices was arrested, leading Bell to believe that Edmondson had reported them to the police so only she could have access to the bank accounts and steal money from him. To get rid of her, he arranged a meeting with her at his workplace on November 11th, 2003, where, after kissing her hello, he pulled out a gun and shot her 3 times in the head. Edmondson's body was found on the following day, but at the time, no conclusive evidence linked her boyfriend to the crime. Number 2. Daniel Wozniak. Daniel Patrick Wozniak is a former American community theater actor who was convicted of 2 counts of execution in September 2016. In May 2010, Wozniak executed his neighbor and friend, Private First Class Samuel Eliza Herr, and Herr's friend Juri Julie Kibuishi, as part of a plan to frame Herr for Kibuishi's execution and steal his combat pay. Wozniak was deeply in debt and wanted money to finance his upcoming wedding and honeymoon. Wozniak and his then fiancée, Rachel May Buffett, lived in the same apartment complex as Herr in Costa Mesa, California. After more than 5 years of court proceedings, Wozniak went to trial and was convicted on 2 accounts of first-degree execution. He was found guilty and sentenced to execution in September 2016. A jury deliberated for 1 hour and 14 minutes before recommending the execution penalty, one of the shortest execution penalty deliberations in Orange County history. Number 1. Donald Dilbeck. On April 11th, 1979, Dilbeck, a 15-year-old high school dropout and runaway, was sitting inside a stolen car at a closed park at the beach in Fort Myers Beach, Florida. Someone made a suspicious person complaint about this, and Lee County Deputy Lynn Hall arrived and questioned Dilbeck. While being questioned by Deputy Lynn Hall, Dilbeck ran from the car. The deputy chased Dilbeck on foot and caught him. During the struggle that followed, Dilbeck, only 15 years old at the time, managed to get the deputy's gun and shot and fatally wounded him. Dilbeck was arrested and on June 6, 1979, sentenced to life imprisonment. Thanks for watching. Let us know which of these inmates you already knew, and we'll see you next time.